All right, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to get started with part 2 of our discussion on fintechs. Thank you for the little glass slap there. There is a camera at the back. This is our live webcast. Hello, everybody. I'm Bruce Sellery, and I'm the moderator of today's event. I'm also a vice president of the Canadian Club, so welcome to our webcast viewers. Welcome again to you. I want to thank our 2 sponsors for today. They are Borden Ladner Gervais, represented by Andrew Harrison. Can you give us a wave, Andrew? Very good. Very good. And Scotiabank, represented by Jillian Riley. A wave from Jillian. Hello, Jillian. Yes, there she is. Beautiful. I also want to recognize our youth and young leaders who are with us today from the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management and York University's Schulich School of Business Finance Club. Where are you? Give us a wave. Give us a wave. There you are. Awesome. Thank you very much for being here. All right, we have 3 panelists up here, and I'm going to introduce them, and I'm also going to ask them for a career highlight. And the reason I'm doing that is all 3 of them have these storied, extraordinary careers, and if I went through a traditional bio, we'd be here all afternoon. So, Janet Bannister, partner, Real Ventures. You've done lots of things, including launching Kijiji.ca, eBay, Pampers Diapers, which is actually how Janet and I know each other. We both worked at Procter & Gamble in the 90s working on Pampers Diapers. But that doesn't have to be your highlight. It could be. It well could be your highlight, and working with me could be a highlight, but you might choose something else.
Well, I was actually going to choose being here today.
That's good, too. That's good, too. So is there a time or a moment or a business you worked on that really stood out for you?
You know, I don't know. I would say that right now, doing what I'm doing is my favorite thing.
Why?
Like, I've been lucky, and I've had a lot of different roles, and that's great. I love being in venture capital because I feel that I am so lucky to get to work with entrepreneurs who are pursuing their vision, and I get to have a small role in helping them realize their dream. And I just think, what could be better than that?
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Jeff Marshall, SVP Digital Banking Canada, Scotiabank. You also have an interesting career background. What is a highlight for you from that time?
Well, you told me I couldn't do anything too recent. So, because obviously the recency effect of what we've been working on at Scotiabank has been pretty exciting. But one in particular moment in time was when I was at Loblaws, and I worked on a small kind of Go team that envisioned what is now the Maple Leaf Garden store down on Carleton. So
who came up with the idea for the cheese wall?
Galen gets credit for everything.
Yeah. Have you seen, there's an entire wall of cheese in this store. It's magic. Yeah. Magic. Nadine Mirchandani, partner, transaction advisory services leader, financial services office, Ernst & Young, based in New York City. She flew in just for the day, but she's from Ottawa. She's a Canadian.
I am a Canadian.
But you've lived in New York for like 16 years.
Yeah, 15, 16 years. It's gone by in a flash.
If you were to choose a highlight, what would it be?
So I'm getting old, so I have to sort of rely on recent memory. But I've had great opportunities in being in New York. I've seen great things. But I have to say, this past year, I was selected to participate in the David Rockefeller fellowship program. So I'm a fellow of the program, and it's a phenomenal partnership about business leaders engaging with the problems of civic leadership. And it's a great group of executives, and we get a chance to sort of do a juiced up civics class and meet all sorts of New York City and state executives, and it's been a phenomenal experience. And I think it's that what we all are here for and what we all like to do is to sort of stretch and disrupt, and I think that sometimes governments needs disruption. And we're living that daily, but sometimes
You're not advocating for a coup.
I'm not advocating for no political statements.
I just wanted to. Okay,
but I also think that industry needs some disruption as well.
Yeah.
And so this is a chance to do that.
All right, so Janet, I'm going to begin with you. You have said that there are 2 types of fintechs, enablers and challengers. Tell us what that distinction is, and of the fintechs that we heard today, is there one in each category that might illuminate those definitions?
Absolutely. So that's right. So the way I often divide fintechs, just to expand on that, is enablers or challengers. And so enablers are fintechs that are working with the established players, and they're helping those players be more effective, be more efficient, provide another value add to their customers. versus challengers are ones that are going head to head with the financial institutions, often establishing a direct relationship with those customers and in order to build their business. So that's sort of at a high level. And frankly, some companies or some firms will do both, right? They'll experiment with both. I think it's very interesting over the last few years, I have seen more of the enablers, or where the challengers sort of morph into also doing enabling things because they recognize that it's very difficult to acquire those customers. And I think often another way to sort of think about it is that when you're looking at a fintech, typically a young fintech company has great new technology or new value proposition or new offering. And the question often from an investor standpoint is, okay, like who's going to win here? Is this upstart, the challenger, are they going to get enough mass of a customer first? Or are the incumbents going to replicate that and go into the same market and then leverage their customer base? So,
Jeff, what is that distinction, what does that look like for the digital factory and for Scotia?
Well, I actually like that distinction because I agree completely.
You can take it.
Yeah.
You have to credit
I
Janet
am.
every time you use it, but you can take it.
Like 50 cents every time I say it or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So, we are looking to partner with enablers. We know that there's competitive threats out there on the challenger side, and they're gonna be successful in their own right. But I agree that customer acquisition is incredibly hard. So on the enabler side, they crave things that we have, which is customers, data, and distribution. And so we're finding that a lot of fintechs are eager to partner with us for those reasons, and we're eager to partner with them because of the innovation and the fresh thinking that they show up with.
Is fintech a thing for a bank, or is it really just innovation that any business would do? Because back in my corporate roots, we were always talking about how we were going to innovate and do differently, and there was futures brand managers, and there was all sorts of things, and yet now we've got this little air quotes thing called fintech, which for an established player would sort of seem like the innovation that would unfold naturally.
Yeah, I actually don't really know what the term means, because it's like kind of how long is a piece of string. Like you could argue that Apple is behaving as a fintech. They're incredibly well capitalized, but they are moving into the financial services arena, as are a lot of the other players in the form of Amazon and Google. And so, are they fintechs? Well, we typically think of fintech kind of in the early definition as being, very small, startup-y, but there's a lot of different size organizations that are starting to play in the financial services arena. So I think it's a very wide and broad definition, but I agree with you. It's just, quite frankly, it's innovation and coming from a variety of places.
We're going to talk about themes in Canada, but Nadine, before we do that, one of the things that the US provides is, in some parts of the business world, some insight into where we are headed as a country. They have scale, they have a whole bunch of things that we don't necessarily have as Canadians. What are some of the themes that you're seeing from your perch in Times Square, literally in Times Square, that are most relevant to fintech that could well play out 6 months or a year down the road here in Canada?
So I loved all the introductions by all the companies that stood up, because that's really, I think, where things are going. So I listened to, it's embedded financial services, right? So putting financial services adjacent to the supply chain, the value chain, or frankly, the way we transact and interact. And it's almost become behind the scenes to some degree. So I think that's a great, distinction. So everybody is sort of used to Uber, and we don't even pay attention to the fact that there's a payment that's, and there's sort of money exchanging hands somewhere, because it's just so embedded in the process, which is to get a car and get from A to B. The other comment out here was about platform. And I think that there's a huge movement around sort of creating platforms and hubs. It doesn't matter how you want to pay, but maybe I'm going to be the sort of the converging and the convening source that allows you to do a credit card or a SWIFT or however else you want to pay. So there's this platform trend, I think, that's out there. And then if I think about sort of the comments here, it's really about alternative, sort of financing vehicles, right? So it started, maybe version 1 was the alternative lending platforms. So it's just a different way to provide financing and liquidity to certain people that need it, leveraging sort of consolidation and scale behind it. And so those are all directions that I think we're definitely going to go. But in some respects, in the US, version 1, frankly, was just taking manual and making it digital, right? And it was sort of focused on efficiencies in the middle and back office of many financial institutions, and it was also changing the customer experience. Now I think we're talking about, frankly, new markets, new growth, new products, and frankly, new gateways to all sorts of new things. I think that's sort of version 2 or maybe version 2 to 3.
You work with so many different clients, really across the spectrum. What are you noticing in terms of buy versus build? So are they universally pursuing a Scotiabank model to say we're going to have this digital factory here, or are some of them saying, listen, we're going to keep our hands out of it, and when the ideas have grown up sufficiently, we're going to buy them, harvest them, and bring them in-house?
So I think the common theme is that everybody wants exposure to the innovation ecosystem, and they're coming at it a couple of different ways. So one is corporate venture capital funds, or frankly putting money to work in venture capital funds out there that are run, by Janet and company. And it's just, frankly, people I think are nervous that they're falling behind, and so they just want to get out there and understand what's in that ecosystem. So that's number one. But by and large, the vast number of sort of financial services, fintech engagement happens through joint ventures, alliances, white labeling, all those types of things that are finding sort of cooperative models. So not necessarily competitive, but cooperative. And I think your comment originally was great, because there's challengers and enablers, and the reality is they're moving back and forth amongst those categories. So people who were originally challengers are now frankly enablers, because they've just become an alternate distribution channel. So I think it's a real sort of synergistic model that we're seeing going forward.
Janet, you not only fund companies, but you also sit on the boards of many of them.
Yes.
What have you learned about helping those companies manage relationships with clients and with potentially competitors as they walk that line of enabler challenger?
You
that
mean
nuance must be tough.
When they're working with financial institutions, you're talking about? Yeah. I think it's, I think there's lots of opportunities for companies to expand their reach, but there's a lot of embedded strategic questions in there, right? And so a classic one is, okay, let's say I'm a company, I'm offering a, whatever I'm offering, whether it be online loans or something, let's just take online loans, to consumers or to small, medium businesses. They can go directly and their economics are much better, or they could partner potentially with a financial institution and get broader distribution, right? And so how do they think about that? How do they think about cannibalization, or is the other one, is it all additive? I think another challenge that a lot of startups have in general is working with the financial institutions in terms of the speed that it takes for those financial institutions to respond. And so how do those startups, if they are purely an enabler, it's often a bit of a chicken and an egg syndrome, because first of all, often banks or financial institutions don't want to be the first one to work with them, right? And so then the other thing is it just takes a long time. So who's going to finance that company for such a long time if they don't have any partnerships? And the banks may say, well, we want to make sure that you have financing, and the financier or the VCs say, well, we want to make sure you have a partner. So like that whole process can be tricky, and I think that's why a lot of startups start off as a challenger, build that critical sort of, show that their value proposition works, that their technology works, and then have the credibility to go to a bank and say, hey, you know what, this now works, now let's partner and really blow it out.
Right, they file down their competitive fangs,
yes,
as it were. Jeff, you were nodding from you, so you're the inverse of this relationship. What's it like to work with the startup community, and what works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, I think we're trying to get to the maturity level where whenever we're attacking a new problem, that we should be indifferent between kind of build versus buy versus partner. Even though the digital factory by and large is designed to build, I think what we are learning that we're actually hard to deal with.
You're learning this today?
Yes. Yeah.
This is today.
No.
Yeah. Newsflash.
Yeah. So, and anybody in the room that's dealt with a large matrix organization knows that it's not easy, right? So we're trying to, they're trying to file their teeth. We're trying to, almost file ours in terms of just making it easier to do business with us, because we have legacy systems, we have control functions and all those things. So we're actually trying to figure out how we can actually be better partners with fintech. So that's a big thing for us, and I think we're learning our way through that. And making it easier, and part of that is changing some of the way our systems work, so that we can be more of kind of an API-based type type ecosystem, so that's easier to plug into us. So those are some of the technical side, and then from a process side, just the way we negotiate contracts and those types of things, we have to get better. But we're definitely on the road to improvement.
Of the three of you, who has the most succinct definition of blockchain?
Ooh.
What do you think? What do you think? I'm going to you, Jeff, first, even because you said
really?
ooh.
That's the.
Can you do it in 2 sentences? You could even use some hand diagrams. As well. Remember, Trudeau explained quantum physics. So the bar
I'm not Justin Trudeau.
You are not, but close.
I would say, moving from a traditional ledger on a bank to a distributed ledger, it's really saying that the version of the truth is shared across a number of people, where the bank is in a typical model of a ledger is the one version of the truth, and so we're sharing that version of the truth across multiple people.
What does it mean, Nadine, for you? I mean, your background is traditional accounting. You are in it to win it on all those statements. How does blockchain change the world from your perspective?
So, I mean, I'm fascinated by blockchain. I think it's intellectually curious. I think where I struggle a little bit with it is there's lots of use cases for it out there that people have bubbled up. It's the adoption, I think, that we're going to be particularly challenged with. I think the aspiration of blockchain versus where we are and frankly where we're going to be in the next little bit is behind. Partly because it requires everybody to get together and to subscribe to this shared, distributed ledger. And we've got independent consortiums out there. We've got people saying my blockchain is better than your blockchain. And until everybody agrees what that sort of common marketplace is, if I could use that term, we're going to struggle, I think, to get to what it's intended to do, which is sort of efficient and sort of that one version of truth that's going to allow for transactions to happen securely, quickly, and effectively. So I think it's got phenomenal potential to completely disrupt financial services, but we're going to struggle, I think, with adoption.
Janet, what do you think? Are there companies who are at the cutting edge or ideas that are at the cutting edge of how to monetize that trend?
Well, I mean, I think there are definitely companies that are using it to be more efficient. So for instance, we haven't invested in, but I've met with a company that's using it to disrupt the remittance space.
The which?
Remittance. So like
remittance.
Like I want to pay somebody in China or Pakistan or wherever I want to pay money, then rather than sending it through the traditional
Western Union.
Western Union, or through the traditional banking system, it can be a lot more cost-effective and efficient to send it through the blockchain.
How does it work with currencies? I'm asking for a friend because, of course, I know this answer. But when it comes to currencies, that would seem to be one big benefit, is that it's able to work that in. But traditionally, if I owe you $1,000 US, I need to at some point convert it into US. How does that work? Jeff? Do you want to
yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna write some code while we're up here.
That would be great. Remember, you're explaining to a 7-year-old. Just pretend I'm a 7-year-old.
Yeah, I think it is this idea of a shared version of the truth that we don't have to go across rails that are necessarily owned by other people, right? And so we have the ability to move money seamlessly and efficiently, again, without this idea of having to go from one bank to another, and kind of that leapfrog that tends to happen with money today, and where people take a piece of the pie, as it's traveling. Where if we can go from point to point very efficiently in ones and zeros, there's effectively a zero-cost transaction, and so that'll be better for people that are moving money. So it'll be lower cost, it'll be fast, it'll be real time, and it'll be in theory risk-free. So I think there's a lot of benefits to that, but I don't think the story's been written yet. There's, to your point, there's so many consortiums out there. There's a lot of proof of concepts that people are investing in, but I haven't seen kind of the one thing really start to take hold yet. And so I think what you're seeing, a lot of organizations with our scale or small startups are all kind of dabbling and making sure that we have the right people and the right technologies that we're moving forward. And we are part of some of those same consortiums. But it is, I think it is a bit of a wait and see. I like your analogy of who's going to win. It's a little bit like beta versus VHS. Right. And at some point in time, we'll wake up and something will have been established, and that we will all rally around that. Right. But I just don't think the story's been written yet.
Right. Yeah, I think it will take. I remember hearing once, and I think about this a lot, that a lot of times with new technologies, that people overestimate the initial impact and underestimate the long-term impact, right? And I mean, just like example, you think about the internet, right back in 1999, right? The huge bubble and all these companies going
Look,
public.
we can share jokes.
Yeah, exactly. And people were sort of like, whoa, this is going to be huge. And all these companies went public at high valuation. They were overestimating, right, the short-term impact. But then long-term, I think people generally underestimated. And I think a lot about that with respect to this, that I think that maybe in the short term, I'm not sure that it will change that much in the short term, but I think in the longer term, it will have profound changes.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to put you on the spot for the second technological definition, Janet, and that is artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay, I can do that.
Oh, good. You like that?
I still have to think about it. Artificial intelligence. Okay, so I would say, I mean, a lot of at the heart of artificial intelligence is a lot about machines. I'm thinking, okay, machines doing what people used to do, and/or machines. I mean, machine learning is really about which is a segment of artificial intelligence, is really about machines learning from themselves. So for instance, the machine can train itself. So if you think about machines looking at visual images, and okay, I mean, if you think about, like, what's the difference between a cat and a dog, right? People know that intuitively, but I mean, how would you describe that, right? There's so many different types of dogs and so many different types of cats, and what's a wolf, right? Like, we know this, but how do you train a machine, right? So that's sort of a classic example where machine learning through one aspect of machine learning is through visualization, where the machine can learn by either making things right or wrong. They think dog, cat, and then they get the feedback. Yes, that was right. No, that was wrong. Then the machine naturally gets smarter, so that it takes in that information. Okay, I made these decisions correctly, these decisions incorrectly. Therefore, I'm going to get smarter in terms of the next, whether it's a cat or a dog or a wolf.
That's good. I like that. Jeff, Nadine, when you think about AI and the acronym and the jargon, what is the big idea? What are the big ideas that you're seeing or thinking about? How does that fit in with fintech?
I think there's a variety of places where in our space where it's coming to roost. I think from kind of you referenced mid and back office. So there's tremendous opportunity on the robotic side of process automation. Where we have fairly human resource kind of dense types of work environments, and so that there's a tremendous amount of structural cost that can be recouped by automating some of those repeatable transactions. So I think we're seeing some things there. I think in terms of machine learning, one of the things for us in the digital space is personalization and contextualization is really going to be the way we serve customers, and the more that we can leverage machine learning to understand what's maybe the next best activity for a customer, or to actually get to the point where we start anticipating what a customer needs. To do that at scale, you can require machine learning.
This is a follow-on. This is a question. By the way, if you have questions, just write them on your pad, wave it around, and one of our volunteers or staff will bring it on up. Nadine, this one is for you, and it's connected to this AI notion, I think. How beautifully timed. How do you see the future of digital labor in the financial services industry? And that's a big question.
It is a big question.
For regardless of where you work in an organization, it's a big question as to whether the machine can learn to do your job.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time talking about sort of robotics, process automation, RPA, and that sort of, I would say, repetitive transactions, as you've alluded to, and we're evolving that to smart automation, which is sort of the machine learning and the AI. But all of those things, I think, have profound implications to the labor force. And so I think there's a lot of conversations about we're freeing up capacity and resources to allow them to do different, more value-add, higher order, and frankly, judgment thinking. And I will never forget, this is about 4 years ago, we were talking about sort of robo-advice. And there's been a lot of discussion about digital wealth, and there are things that I'm happy to have a machine sort of tell me what to do with algorithms. There's certain things that I still want to speak to a person about, or I still want sort of someone who's got some advice and value. And we have to find those things in our organizations and make sure that we're devoting and retraining our resources to better serve that. And but it is a discussion about sort of the labor force, and how do we make sure that we're training the labor force today that that we're going to need in the future. We don't have enough digital scientists. We do not have enough programmers. We do not have enough visionaries who are thinking about what's even next after that I can't even envision. And there's companies actually that are sprouting up across across the US that's really about transforming workforces. And that's become a huge industry. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think we're moving to full employment industry to a much more fluid workflow and work sort of collaboration industry. So people might not have full-time jobs, they might have gigs, and they might have sort of part-time jobs because their skills and their demand are not readily available. So they do a gig over here and they'll do a job over here. And I think it speaks to maybe just flexibility-wise where the next generation is going. So I think we're gonna have a complete transformation of the entire workforce, and how we think about jobs and employment today is not going to be how we think about it in the future. And a lot of the new startup companies are really talking about that sort of temporary worker, and how do we actually enable temporary workers to be part of organizations and to give them what they need, be it benefits and healthcare and all the other things that we struggle with in the US.
Janet, I want to get into your brain and look at the process through which you think about the new ideas that land on your desk. How do you determine what is going to earn not even just an investment, what's going to earn a meeting, aside from the fact that the company name needs to be a misspelled word that already exists somewhere else, like Pluto or Sensible or, you know, that must be a part of it.
So, I mean, so we invest in the very early stage. At seed stage, we're typically the first institutional investor that invests in a company. So, I mean, I was saying at lunch, we're not like going through spreadsheets and type of things that more of a private equity investor would do. At the very high level, what we look at is two things. One, is this a big idea? And by that, what we're looking for is, can this be a $100 million company? Can this idea be a $100 million? Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of things in terms of competitiveness, you know, size of the market, but at the very high level, that's one thing. And then the second thing is the team. And it's like, okay, can the team execute on that? Can they deliver on that vision? So that really, as I said, at a very high level are the two big buckets.
How do you think about regionality in financial services? Because it's very different than if you were talking about social media ideas. Who cares where WhatsApp was or any of those other, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But here there's so much regulatory and ownership and so many restrictions. Does that alter how you think about $100 million?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of regionality, it's interesting. Virtually all of our companies, in order to be at that size, they need to be thinking international from day one. I think that financial services is perhaps the only sort of area that we invest in that we think, you know what, you actually could build a huge business just in Canada. Not saying that, hey, all fintech companies should not go international, but I think when we think is that it's one of the few areas where the pie is so large that you can build a great company, depending upon a whole bunch of other factors, but it's possible to be primarily a Canadian company.
This question, Janet, how do you look at valuation of early stage investments where they are essentially, this is an assertion, where they are essentially bets versus an investment in economic fundamentals? Are they bets? Do you think of them as bets?
No.
No.
Oh.
No.
Well, I don't know. I guess it depends what the word bet is. Bet sort of, you know.
You're not in the business of gambling.
Yeah, we're not in the business of gambling. I think that, you know, we do a lot of work in assessing the technology, what's the value proposition, who are the target customers, how large is the market, what else is going on around the world in this. Let's dig into the founders. Who are the founders? What have they done in the past, et cetera. So, we do a lot to try to not have them, you know, sort of risky bets. But I mean, that being said, it's true if you look at the economics of most early stage funds that about half of the companies will fail. But anyways, get the bag. What was this?
How you think about valuation?
Oh, the valuation. Okay.
When it's not based on something.
So we think about the valuation in a couple of different ways. We look at, okay, what the stage is relative to other companies. What valuation or how much money are they going to need to get to the next stage? We like to invest and get 10 to 15% of the company. So, you know, how much are we willing to pay to get there? How certain are we that this is going to be a huge idea? when are they going to? How much are they raising now, and when are they going to need to raise money the next round? And what do we think the valuation is going to be there? So, in sort of a benchmark is we like to see that value. Ideally, you increase threefold the valuation by the time you do your next raise, right? So there's a whole bunch of different factors that we think through. Yeah.
But it's still more art than science.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jeff, this one's for you. Canada has an advantage in the AI space currently. What needs to happen and who has to be involved to make sure we execute and take advantage of our early lead?
I'll believe the fact that we have an advantage. I don't know whether that's a fact or not. But,
okay.
Certainly, I think we've got we've got a really robust educational system in Canada. So we're actually producing talent, which I think is probably where if there's an advantage, that's probably where it comes from. And I think we have some well-capitalized companies that can actually put it into action, whether that's in the telecommunications space or whether that's in the financial services industry. So I think it's we have to try to keep the talent here would be probably one thing, and actually put it to good use. And again, I think it's incumbent upon us to find the right use cases and put them into action. And I think and so some of that too is probably educating our leaders about what the opportunity is in AI, and that it's something to be embraced, not feared. Because I do think there's a little bit of fear about what that means. And when we get into things like RPA, you actually get into you start talking about labor and some of the implications of that. There's a whole bunch of downstream implications that can be thorny.
Nadine, as machine learning and AI become more prevalent, who owns accountability for errors? Humans can be fired, but who do you think owns accountability? How do companies think about that?
It's a great question.
Just blame it on the Commodore 64 sitting in the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Half the room had no idea what you just said.
Really?
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly.
Am I now the old guy?
Yeah. Yes, we are.
If you went Vic 20, you would have lost like 3/4 of the room.
I would have lost the whole thing.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I think so much of, and I turn to the legal professionals in the room, I think there's so much of uncharted territory as it comes to many of these things. But so I don't really have a good answer to that one. At the end of the day, though, there's a legal answer to that, but there's a customer answer to that, right? And I think we all have to sort of understand there's fact, and then there's the sort of the experience of the marketplace that we're trying to deliver into. And I'm not so sure that we can divorce the two. So I think what happens sometimes
is we would forget about the from too, right? Like the humans were making errors today, and usually when you move to a new technology, the errors actually go down. But we get really fussed when a machine makes a mistake. Right? But if you look at and whether you're talking about something like autonomous cars, for example, right? If you're talking about artificial intelligence, that people have accidents every day. It took me 2 hours to get in today because somebody crashed a car on the QEW. But and when we move to autonomous vehicles, it will drop precipitously. But the first time that a Tesla takes out an 8-year-old, that'll be it. Right, so I think we have to figure out the legal framework. But we have to, as a society, we have to think about the from to and the greater good. And I think in this case, whether it's on the business side, it'll be what's the greater good. If we're making fewer mistakes and taking out cost out of our businesses, that's going to be a good thing.
We're going to segue to our last question, because if you can believe it, we're almost out of time, which is heartbreaking to me, but this has been a fantastic discussion. Thinking about the greater good, the last question that I want to ask each of you is, what is your great hope, or what is one thing you are excited about when it comes to fintech in particular, for the Canadian ecosystem, for Canadian companies, for Canadian workers, for Canadian investors? So one thing you're excited about, or one hope, and I will ask the eternally optimistic Janet Bannister to answer first.
Okay. Well, I am super excited about the state of the technology ecosystem. I could call it startups, but startup scale-ups in Canada. I'm very excited. I think that we are at a tipping point. I spent 4 years of my career at eBay in Silicon Valley, and so I've experienced that. And I am very, very excited about the scale of the companies that Canada is going to create over the next 5 to 10 years. We have repeat entrepreneurs who are now starting a business. We have talent that has been in businesses before that are coming back. So we have the talent both at the senior level as well as the other levels who have done it before. We have great educational institutions that are producing lots of engineers. Ontario actually graduates more STEM students every year than the state of California. And then we have, the aspirations. And I think, Canada was for a long time viewed as, hey, the problem with Canadian entrepreneurs is they sell out too early, right? They want to sell out, make a couple million, buy their place in Muskoka, and just, retire. And I think as you're seeing more startups, it's a flywheel, it's a snowball, right? And now it's viewed as, hey, you know what? If Shopify can do it, if Hootsuite can do it, if these companies can do it, then I want to be able to do it too. And the more we see of that, the more positive energy that we're going to see.
That's great. Jeff?
I think I'm super optimistic that there is this idea of, it's not fintech versus large or fintech versus bank. Or I think that just a incredibly strong, healthy ecosystem is on the way. Of that, I think all these companies are going to be able to coexist. Those that aren't as innovative or well thought out or well managed are going to fail. But I actually think that overall, I think the game's going to come up in this country, both through the startup community and the fintech community, as well as large organizations like Scotiabank, because I think they start to push each other, and I think we're going to see just the game gets raised on all accounts.
That's great. Nadine?
So I echo a little bit of that. I'm just excited about the fact that this is really about growth, right? It's about expanding financial inclusion to people who might not otherwise have been traditionally served. And so that means growing the market in financial services. And you sort of see how technology and digital has sort of leapfrogged and provided financial product solutions in a marketplace to people who otherwise didn't. That's just growth in the industry. And it's an industry that I think is incredibly, I always say that some of the traditional financial services institutions often get sort of painted as being traditional and staid and not change. I mean, the amount of dollars and technology money that's being deployed against change and the attitude, I think, from all the way from the C-suite through the organization around sort of the possible is incredibly heartening, I think. And I think it's about growth in this industry, nothing but.
And we shouldn't forget about the end user, which is all of us, which is the customer. Right? I think as consumers, we're all going to benefit because the innovation and the different ways of tapping into this industry are going to change. And I think as a user of these services, I think it's pretty exciting.
Jeff, Nadine, Janet, thank you very much.
Hey,
round of applause for our panelists. And we're just going to stay seated. I'm going to pass the baton to Jillian Riley.
Thank you. My name is Jillian Riley, and I am the president-elect of the Canadian Club of Toronto. I feel incredibly optimistic after listening to this discussion. I go back to my workplace and feel encouraged about our education system, and the discussion that we've had here today is one of the most optimistic that I've heard in a long time. So this discussion has certainly been one that I'm sure we're all going to be remembering and thinking about. Janet, Jeff, and Nadine, we like the examples that you provided. And for me in particular, the discussion about blockchain, which certainly isn't an easy one, and there's lots of different versions about blockchain. And I think you simplified it into something meaningful, but I do think it's going to change the way we do things long into the future once the story gets written, as you said. The relationship between a business and its financial institution is a key part of its success. And as you pointed out, regardless of efficiencies that drive the transactional nature of the industry, the relationship dynamic needs to be maintained. We wish you all continued success in your leadership roles. And to Bruce, your moderating, it was exquisite and extraordinary today. I particularly enjoyed the opening with our 4 guests who shared with us their business ventures. I think that was very engaging. I'd also like to just share with you some upcoming events at our club. Next Tuesday, April 18th, the Disruption Conversation continues with our social innovation panel moderated by Allison Hewitt. And the following day, April 19th, The Honourable Ahmad Hussein, Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, will be at our podium. To order your tickets or learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I would encourage you after today's discussion to tweet something, because I think it's an important topic. I'd also like to extend another round of thank you to today's event sponsors, Borden Ladner Gervais and Scotiabank. We'd also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Thank you very much for being with us today, and have a wonderful afternoon. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you.